My name is Holden Parrish, and for as long as I can remember, my value in this family has been measured by two things: how useful I am and how quietly I stay in line. I've spent the better part of 2 decades helping my parents, Evelyn and Robert Parrish, run their family business, a property management company that started small and grew into something that paid for the house on the hill, the private schools for my brother Ethan, and the vacations in Aspen that they loved to post about. I wasn't just an employee. I built their systems. I streamlined their operations. I kept the engine running while they smiled for the cameras. But when you're too dependable, too steady, too there, you stop being seen. And when you finally speak up, they remind you of your place. It started with a simple email. Subject line: family business meeting. No pleasantries, no details, just a time and place, Saturday 11 a.m., the Fairmont room. That was how it always was with them. Short, direct, no space for questions. Ethan's name was on the CC line. Mine, just in BCC. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the flicker of my inbox for a long moment. I knew what this was about. The whispers had been growing for months. Conversations I'd overheard between my mother and Ethan about new directions, about leaner operations. I was the leanest part of this operation. But I wasn't Ethan. He was the face, the handshake, the polished smile that closed deals over golf courses and expensive scotch. I was the guy in the background, the one who made sure the rent payments processed, that the software worked, that tenant complaints didn't end up in legal messes. I showed up at the Fairmont room early that Saturday, the kind of place where the chairs had more padding than most people's bank accounts. Mom was already seated, nursing a glass of sparkling water, her pearl earrings catching the morning light. Dad was scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging me. Ethan came in 5 minutes late, grinning like the star of the show. "Holden," Ethan greeted, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old pals instead of brothers who hadn't shared more than a 3-sentence exchange in months. "Let's get started," Mom said, cutting through the air like a blade. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that meant decisions had already been made. "We've been evaluating the business," she began, folding her hands neatly, "and we're making some structural changes." I waited, hands clasped, already feeling the edge of the blade. "Ethan's stepping into a more executive role," Dad added, finally glancing up. "We need someone forward-facing." I blinked. "Ethan doesn't know the back end of our operations. I'm the one who's kept this running." Ethan's smile tightened. "It's about optics, Holden. Clients trust faces they recognize." "And we trust Ethan to lead us into the next phase," Mom chimed in, her voice wrapped in silk but her eyes cold. My throat tightened. "So where does that leave me?" Dad cleared his throat. "We're restructuring your role, moving some of your responsibilities to outsourced teams. It's more efficient that way." I stared at them, at Ethan's polished smirk, at Mom's practiced calm, at Dad's disinterest. I had built their infrastructure from the ground up, coded the systems that tracked payments, automated reports, managed tenant records, and now I was being restructured. "You'll still be compensated for a transitional period," Mom offered like she was doing me a favor. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "And after that?" Ethan leaned forward, steepling his hands. "We'll figure something out. No titles, no promises, just air." I left that meeting with a check for severance and a list of things they wanted me to hand over. System passwords, documentation that barely existed because they'd never approved a team to help me maintain it. I walked out into the biting Chicago wind, the glass towers of downtown reflecting the sky like they were untouchable. But as I stood there, that familiar ache in my chest settling deeper, something clicked. They thought they could erase me from this business, from this family, as easily as erasing a name from a ledger. What they didn't realize was, I never planned to go quietly. Curious how you'd handle a betrayal like this? Let me know your thoughts below. The severance check sat untouched on my kitchen counter for 2 days. I didn't cash it. I couldn't bring myself to. Every time I looked at it, the figure felt like an insult. 2 months' pay to walk away from 18 years of building something they couldn't even understand. Elaine, my wife, said nothing the first day. She knew me well enough to give me space. But on the second night, she sat across from me at the dinner table, fork idly pushing peas around her plate. "They expect you to hand over everything?" she asked, her voice low, measured. I nodded, leaning back in my chair, staring at the check. "Passwords, system architecture, the whole back end." Her brow furrowed. "And you're going to?" I ran my thumb along the seam of the check, feeling the paper bite at my skin. "It's all tied to me. Half of it's custom code, no documentation. They didn't want to fund it. Elaine's eyes softened. You built their house on sand. And now they want the deed. I smirked bitterly. Yeah, they're about to find out how hard that foundation is to replicate. On Monday morning, I drafted a polite email to Ethan and Mom, acknowledging the severance package, requesting clarification on the timeline for transferring my duties. I kept it professional, detached, but every word felt like I was carving out my own erasure. Ethan replied within the hour. Hey Holden, appreciate your professionalism here. We'll need everything by the end of the week to keep things smooth for the outsourced team. Don't worry, we've got this covered. We got this covered. The same guy who once called me in a panic because the company server threw a minor error during tax season. I stared at his message, knowing he didn't have a clue what he was walking into. Their outsourced team wasn't going to unravel what I'd built overnight. They probably thought they could plug in a new system like replacing a light bulb. They had no idea I'd spent years stitching together a complex, secure network, layers of fail-safes, redundancies designed to protect tenant data, compliance protocols that had kept them out of legal trouble more times than they knew, and every critical part of that system lived inside my head. But I wasn't going to lift a finger to explain it. That night, I sat on the porch with Elaine, a cold beer sweating in my hand, the lake dark and still beneath the stars. So, she said softly, what's your plan? I took a long sip, letting the cold bitterness ground me. I'm going to give them exactly what they asked for. Elaine raised an eyebrow. I smiled faintly. The passwords, the logins, the map of the system they always refused to document. But I'm not fixing it for them. I'm not going to stick around when the cracks start showing. Elaine reached over, her fingers resting lightly on my arm. You're not angry? I stared out at the water. I was, but now I just feel done. But that wasn't the whole truth. Deep down, something sharper stirred beneath the calm. Not spite, not revenge. Just the quiet certainty that they would understand my worth when the house started crumbling without me. By Friday, I sent over a neat packet. Passwords, system overview, the basic structure they'd asked for. Ethan replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a, thanks bro, smooth sailing ahead. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The first call came a week later. Ethan, his voice brittle but trying too hard to sound casual. Hey Holden, quick question. The payment processing tool is flagging some weird errors. The outsourced guys are a little stuck. Any chance you could walk them through it? I let the silence sit for a beat too long before answering. I gave you everything I had, Ethan. Yeah, I know. But just a quick call? I smiled into the phone, my voice smooth as glass. I'm sure you've got this covered. Click. 2 days later, Mom called. Holden, darling. I cut her off gently. Mom, you made a decision. I respect it. But you've got a team now. They'll handle it. Her sigh crackled through the line like static. There's no need to be difficult. I almost laughed. I wasn't being difficult. I was just done. Have you ever been in a situation where walking away spoke louder than words? Share your thoughts below. The front page of the business journal sat folded on my kitchen counter, headline bold across the top. Veltria's legacy systems fail, clients in uproar. Underneath, a photograph of Ethan standing stiffly behind a podium, his smile tight, eyes hollow. A far cry from the man who once strutted through the office like he owned the future. Elaine set a cup of coffee beside the paper, her hand resting on my shoulder longer than usual. She didn't say anything. She knew I didn't need words this morning. It wasn't the article that caught me off guard. It was the timing. Barely 3 weeks since they'd cut me loose. Barely 3 weeks, and already Ethan's cost-cutting genius was unraveling for everyone to see. The article went into detail. Westbrook Properties, one of Veltria's biggest clients, had suspended payments due to system failures. Maintenance requests were going unfulfilled. Tenant portals were down. Automated billing had miscalculated rent for over 200 residents. A number leapt out at me. $2.3 million in pending payments frozen due to technical issues. That number had weight. It was proof that the expensive redundancy layers I'd spent years defending weren't just unnecessary complexity. They were the reason Veltria had never faced this kind of crisis before. Elaine caught my gaze drifting back to the page and gave a small shake of her head. You built it too well, she murmured, half in jest, half in sorrow. I didn't reply. My chest tightened with something I couldn't quite name. Satisfaction wasn't the word. It felt too hollow for what this was. But I won't lie. There was something steadying about watching the cracks widen. A chime broke the silence. An email notification from Harold Whitman. That caught me. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Harold was the CEO of Whitman Residential, a competitor, but not a rival. He'd run a leaner operation for decades, respected in the industry, but never flashy. He was old school in the way that mattered, people first, system second. I clicked the message open. Subject: coffee. Holden, I've been following the Veltria fallout. Can't say I'm surprised. We've always respected your work here. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk. We're considering expanding, and you might be just the person we need to help us do it right. No strings, just coffee. Harold. I leaned back, absorbing the offer. It wasn't the first I'd gotten since leaving, but Harold's timing was sharp. Before I could respond, my phone lit up again. Ethan. I let it ring to voicemail. 10 seconds later, another buzz. This time a text. Please call me back. We need to talk. Urgent. Urgent. That word felt ironic. I set my phone down and walked to the window, staring out at the pale ripple of Lake Ontario. The surface was calm, unbothered by whatever storm Ethan was caught in. But I wasn't completely cold. I knew I'd take the call. Not for Ethan, but for myself. I wasn't ready to close the book just yet. I let the phone ring 3 more times before answering. Ethan, I said, voice flat. There was silence on the other end, then a sharp inhale. Holden, I know you're busy, but I need your help. I didn't answer, just let him stew. The systems, they're falling apart faster than we can patch them. The consultants can't even get into half of your back-end code. Payments are frozen. Maintenance tickets are stacking up. It's a disaster. I let the pause drag. Then, so now I'm valuable again? Come on, Ethan's tone cracked. This isn't about that. This is about the company, about our family legacy. That word, family, I nearly laughed. Ethan loved pulling the family card when it suited him. The same man who'd sat across from me in the boardroom and called me a liability to growth. You made your call, Ethan, I said, voice even. You picked your 3 junior engineers over me. Because you made it impossible to scale? His frustration burst through. Everything was so tied to you. You've made yourself indispensable. That's not healthy for any company. And yet, I replied, keeping my tone soft, here you are. His breathing hitched. He knew I wasn't wrong. Look, just name your price, Ethan said, desperation threading his words. Come in as a consultant. Help us stabilize. The board's on edge. Westbrook's threatening to pull out. And if that happens, you're cooked, I finished for him. Silence. I don't think you understand what we're up against, Ethan tried again. The private equity firm is leaning hard. If we lose Westbrook, they'll force a sale, a fire sale. There it was, the bigger picture. The private equity firm wanted out, and Ethan had been hired to pretty up the books for a clean exit. But now that plan was crumbling with every system failure. Holden, please, Ethan's voice cracked. Don't let this be the end of everything Dad built. For a flicker of a second, that line got to me. I remembered Dad's office, the dusty framed blueprint of Veltria's first property, the pride in his eyes when I launched the automated maintenance platform that streamlined operations. But this wasn't about Dad. This was about Ethan, who'd spent the last 2 years making sure I was boxed out. I took a breath, slow and steady. Ethan, you made your bed. Now you're finding out what it feels like to sleep in it. I'll triple whatever they're paying you, he pushed. Anything. I gave him the final nail. It's not about the money. It's about the respect that should have come with it. I hung up, setting the phone gently on the counter. My hands weren't shaking. Not this time. Elaine walked in, her gaze soft but knowing. You okay? I nodded. Yeah, I am. I stared back at that folded newspaper headline. Veltria's unraveling wasn't a victory, but it was a reckoning. Harold Whitman didn't waste time with small talk. We met at a quiet coffee shop on the east side of town, away from the glare of downtown and the whispers that followed the Veltria collapse. He was already seated when I arrived, a worn leather folder beside his coffee, hands folded like a man who knew the value of patience. Holden, he greeted, standing to shake my hand. His grip was steady, the kind of handshake that said, I'm here for real conversation, not posturing. We ordered our drinks, the small talk mercifully short before Harold opened the folder and slid a few pages toward me. These are Veltria's recent client losses, he said. Not just Westbrook. 3 mid-sized property firms have either suspended or terminated contracts, word spreading. I skimmed the list, my stomach knotting tighter with every name. This wasn't just a system failure. This was a hemorrhage. They're going to fold if this keeps up, I muttered, glancing up. That's why I asked to meet, Harold leaned in, voice low. I want to know how bad it really is inside those systems. Could they even recover at this point? I leaned back, weighing how much to say. I wasn't here to sling dirt, but I also wasn't going to sugarcoat it. The architecture was built to scale, but it's custom. Without the right oversight, it's like handing a Formula One car to someone who's only driven an automatic. I paused. And Ethan fired the pit crew. Harold gave a small, grim smile. That's what I thought. He tapped the edge of the folder. I want you to come on board, Holden. We're planning an expansion, acquiring a smaller firm, maybe even absorbing some of Veltria's clients if they pull the trigger. But I need someone who can handle the infrastructure. Build it right. I raised an eyebrow. You want me to rebuild Veltria's system under Whitman? I want you to build something better, he corrected. Veltria's mess isn't salvageable, not at the scale we need, but their client base, their footprint, that's still valuable. I sat back, processing. This wasn't just an offer. It was a chance to outmaneuver Ethan, to take the scraps he left behind and build something stronger. But my gut twisted at the thought of profiting from what my father had built, even if Ethan had trashed it. Let me think about it, I said, my voice measured. Harold nodded. No pressure, but you'll want to decide soon. Veltria's days are numbered. I shook his hand again and left, my mind spinning. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed again. Ethan. This time I let it ring out. 5 minutes later, a text. Holden, the board's considering a full system shutdown. We need you, please. I stared at the message, the weight of it sinking in. A full shutdown. That was Veltria's last gasp. Once systems were offline, even temporarily, trust would be gone. Elaine leaned over my shoulder, reading the text. She shook her head slowly. He's learning. Too late. But something gnawed at me. The pull of history. The urge to not let the legacy our father had started die this way. I stood up, paced to the window, staring at the dark lake. If I don't do something, I murmured, they'll crash it into the ground. Elaine's voice was soft but certain. They already have. I sat back down, flicked my phone off, and let the silence settle. The following morning, a second email from Harold awaited me. Subject: Urgent. Westbrook's decision pending Holden. Westbrook is about to cut ties with Veltria officially. They've reached out to us about potential transition plans, but they're concerned about continuity. I know you know their systems inside and out. I'm prepared to offer you the role of chief systems architect, full autonomy, and a stake in the expansion. Let's talk. Harold. It was all happening faster than I anticipated. By lunchtime, another call from Ethan. This time I answered. Holden, his voice cracked. I'm serious. The board's talking about liquidation. I've lost Westbrook. They won't return my calls. Ethan, I interrupted, keeping my tone even. What do you expect me to do? Help us stabilize the system, he pleaded. Just enough to stop the bleeding. I took a breath. This was the moment I'd been circling. Ethan, you made your decision. You gambled on cutting corners, and now you want me to patch it up? For what? So you can flip the company and walk away? His voice broke. Holden, please. This isn't about me. It's about saving what's left. I paused, letting the silence stretch until he squirmed. I've had an offer, I said, my voice steady. Harold Whitman. He wants me to build something new, clean. Silence on the other end. I could take the job and never look back, I added, but I'll give you one chance. Ethan exhaled, desperation lacing his words. Anything. I want to look at the board's plans, full transparency. You show me everything you've been hiding, the sale negotiations, the financials, the system logs, and then maybe we talk. Ethan hesitated. That was the tell. Or don't, I added, and I'll let Harold know I'm all in. He caved. Fine, you'll have it by tomorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind churned with numbers, projections, the hollow ache of betrayal that had festered for years. I remembered something Dad once told me, standing outside the first property we'd automated together. It's not about who gets the credit, son. It's about who makes it last. I stared at my ceiling, knowing that what Ethan built wouldn't last, but what I could build next, that might. Have you ever stood at a crossroads between helping those who wronged you and choosing your own future? Let me know where you're watching from. The documents arrived in my inbox the next morning. Hundreds of pages of financial reports, board meeting notes, and email chains. Ethan wasn't bluffing this time, or maybe he just had nothing left to lose. I sat at my desk, the familiar lake view outside my window dulled by a gray sky, and scrolled through the mess Veltria had become. Buried in the numbers, I found what I suspected all along. The private equity firm wasn't just prepping Veltria for a sale, they were gutting it. Cutting costs wasn't about efficiency. It was about inflating profit margins for the quarterly reports to attract buyers. They'd stripped the IT department, delayed critical maintenance, rejected system upgrades, all for short-term gains. But the most damning document came near the end. A confidential memo, projected sale of Veltria Holdings to Norwest Capital, pending stabilization of system functionality and retention of major clients, including Westbrook Properties, contingent on a 20% increase in quarterly profits via workforce reductions and system outsourcing. I leaned back, my chest tightening. They were playing a game of smoke and mirrors, knowing full well the systems would eventually fail. Ethan had been a pawn, and so had I. The phone rang before I could process it fully. Harold. I heard back from Westbrook, he said, no pleasantries. They're losing patience. I rubbed my temples. Ethan's giving me full access. I can stabilize Veltria long enough to keep them from pulling out. Harold didn't respond right away. You're still considering going back? He finally asked. I'm considering saving what my father built, I replied, my voice low. Silence again. Then Harold exhaled. Do what you need to, he said. But if Westbrook calls me again, I won't wait. That afternoon, I called Ethan. You've been lying to me longer than I thought, I said when he answered. He didn't deny it. I didn't have a choice. Of course you did, I snapped. You chose to gut the infrastructure, cut people loose, and hope no one noticed. His voice cracked. The firm backed me into a corner. They told me it was either cut costs or get replaced. And you didn't think to tell me that? He let out a shaky breath. Would it have mattered? I paused, the weight of the years between us pressing down. We were never just brothers. We were rivals in a house that only had room for one golden child. Here's the deal, I said finally, my voice steady. I'll come back, but only on my terms. He was silent, waiting. I get direct access to the board. You step back. No interference, no veto. I run the system stabilization. And what do you get out of it? I hesitated. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I get the right to walk away when this is over. Clean, no strings. Ethan swallowed. Fine. I hung up, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with the realization that I wasn't doing this for him. I was doing it to salvage a legacy before it burned. I drove to Veltria's headquarters the next morning for the first time since I'd been shoved out. The lobby hadn't changed. Polished marble, glass walls, the company logo still gleaming overhead like nothing was wrong, but everything was wrong. The receptionist offered a tight smile, clearly briefed on my return. I nodded, heading straight for the server room. The hum of the machines greeted me like old friends. I knew this place better than anyone ever would. Alan, the lone holdout from the old engineering team, was waiting for me. Good to see you back, he said, half smiling. For now, I replied. We spent the next 4 hours combing through system logs, patching critical gaps, rerouting data flows. Every corner I turned revealed another shortcut Ethan's cost-cutting had carved into the foundation. Alan sighed, leaning against the server rack. It's worse than I thought, I nodded. We can stabilize it, but just barely. The door opened behind us and Ethan walked in, looking like he hadn't slept in days. How long, he asked, skipping the greetings. If we push hard, 2 weeks for minimal stability. But full recovery? I shook my head. 3 months. Easy. Ethan's face twisted. We don't have 3 months. I crossed my arms. Then I suggest you buy yourself some time. That night, Elaine and I sat on the deck, wine glasses in hand. The sun dipped low over the water, painting the sky orange. You okay? She asked, watching me. I don't know, I admitted. I keep asking myself why I'm doing this. She smiled softly. Because it matters. Maybe not to Ethan, but to you. I looked out at the horizon, feeling the tension ease just slightly. It's funny, I murmured. I used to think this was about proving I was right. And now? Now I just want to make sure they don't tear it all down. Elaine leaned against my shoulder. That's what makes you different from them. Ever had to fix something that someone else broke, just to protect what matters to you? Let me know where you're watching from. The call came at 6:12 a.m., sharp enough to cut through the quiet of my kitchen like a blade. I let it ring twice before answering. Holden, it's Ethan. My brother's voice rasped on the other end, less assured than usual, stripped of its practiced bravado. We have a situation. It's bad. I leaned against the counter, watching the steam rise from my coffee. Define bad. Silence. Then a rushed explanation I'd been half expecting but still relished hearing aloud. Westbrook Properties just sent notice. They're pulling their contract, effective immediately. That's nearly 40% of our operating revenue gone. His voice cracked under the weight of what that meant. I took a slow breath, steadying the mix of vindication and melancholy pooling in my chest. You should have seen it coming, Ethan. The system was built to serve, not to be stripped for parts. We need to talk, he pressed, ignoring the barb. Face to face. I agreed, setting the time and place. There was something in his voice that sounded like desperation wearing the mask of negotiation. But he knew, and I knew, this meeting wasn't about salvaging Veltria. It was about salvaging Ethan. The boardroom smelled of stale coffee and something sourer beneath it. Panic, maybe. Ethan sat at the far end, jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie askew. Beside him, Janice from legal, looking like she'd aged 5 years since I last saw her. A few other familiar faces filled the seats, some avoiding my gaze altogether. Ethan stood when I entered, gesturing to a seat like we were old comrades instead of what we really were, estranged brothers sitting on opposite sides of a crumbling empire. Holden, he said, forcing a smile. Appreciate you coming in. We need your help. I know, I replied, sliding into the chair at the opposite end, keeping my posture easy, my tone even. Janice cleared her throat. We're facing multiple system failures across Veltria's properties. Maintenance logs are corrupt. Payment processing errors have triggered tenant disputes. If we can't resolve this within 30 days, the private equity firm will collapse the sale entirely. I glanced at Ethan. His face tightened at that last part. That sale was the only reason he'd pushed me out in the first place, to make the numbers look leaner, prettier. Now the cracks were showing. What are you offering? I asked, cutting to the chase. Ethan exchanged a glance with Janice. A reinstatement, full salary, plus a signing bonus. You'd oversee the system recovery and work alongside the consultants to restore operations. I let the offer hang between us for a moment, then smiled. I'm already contracted with another firm. We'll double whatever they're paying, Ethan pushed, leaning forward. Hell, triple it if that's what it takes. Money, always the same reflex. It's not about the money, I said quietly. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then what is it about? I leaned forward, elbows on the table. It's about the way you treated me, the way you treated the work. You didn't just fire me, Ethan. You dismantled everything I built without even trying to understand it. And now you expect me to patch it back together like none of it happened? Janice shifted uncomfortably. Ethan's knuckles whitened against the table. We need you, he said again, lower this time, almost pleading. I tapped my fingers against the polished wood, letting the tension breathe. I'm willing to help, on my terms. Ethan sat back, arms crossed. What terms? You relinquish all technical control, I replied. I lead the system recovery, full autonomy, no board interference, and when this is done, I walk away clean. No strings. Ethan opened his mouth to argue but stopped. He knew he was out of moves. Janice broke the silence. And the compensation? I shrugged. Let's start at $500 an hour. Ethan flinched, but Janice nodded. Agreed. And one more thing, I added, standing. I won't do this for you. I'll do it for the tenants, the people your system is failing. I walked out without waiting for a response. Over the next few weeks, the work began. I returned, not as a subordinate, but as the architect brought back to salvage what others had broken. Each line of code I rewrote felt like reclaiming a part of myself they'd tried to discard. But I wasn't fixing Veltria for Ethan. I was laying the foundation for what came next. Because in the background, the team at Devlin Systems, my new team, was readying their infrastructure to absorb Westbrook Properties and every other client that would soon jump ship from Veltria. I wasn't building for the past anymore. I was building for the future. The last data migration completed at 2:14 a.m. on a Thursday morning. I watched the progress bar slide to 100%, the new system humming beneath it, stable and clean like it had always belonged there. Across 2 screens, every tenant record, payment log, and maintenance request now sat within Devlin Systems infrastructure. Secure, documented, fully functional. Veltria's digital lifeblood was no longer theirs. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the office window as the city skyline blinked quietly in the distance. The final contract had been signed the day before. Westbrook Properties was officially under Devlin's management. Their faith in the rebuild wasn't just a vote of confidence, it was the death knell for Veltria. The call from Ethan came the next morning. I let it ring longer than I needed to before answering. Holden, he started, voice worn thin, stripped of its usual polish. It's done. The sale collapsed last night. The private equity firm pulled out. I let the silence hang, waited for the real reason he'd called. They're shutting Veltria down, liquidating assets. The board blamed me. I nodded slowly, though he couldn't see it. They should have blamed the system they never understood. There was a pause, the weight of everything unsaid pressing into the space between us. I know this doesn't fix anything, Ethan finally said, softer than I expected, but I'm sorry, for all of it. I wanted to tell him it was too late, that no apology could stitch together what years of undermining and betrayal had broken, but instead I said nothing. I'd learned that some silences speak louder than words. I heard Westbrook signed with Devlin, he added, like it hurt to say it out loud. They did. You'll do right by them? I glanced at the monitors, at the stable system we'd built from the ground up. I already have. Ethan let out a breath, hollow and frayed. Take care of yourself, Holden. You too, I replied, though we both knew we'd probably never speak again. I hung up, setting the phone down gently. No triumph, no vindication, just the quiet certainty that I'd done what needed to be done. 6 months later, Devlin Systems stood at the forefront of the industry, having absorbed not just Westbrook, but several smaller firms who'd seen Veltria's collapse as a cautionary tale. The architecture we'd built was praised for its resilience, its transparency, its seamless functionality. But for me, it was more than that. It was proof. Proof that doing things right the first time mattered, that experience, care, and respect couldn't be replaced by a spreadsheet and a cheaper head count. Lawrence stopped by my office that afternoon, leaning against the doorframe with that easy confidence he wore so well. We're hosting a partner summit next month, he said. Jeffrey Westbrooks asked if you'll speak, wants to hear the story of how we turned things around. I smiled faintly, shaking my head. I'm not much for podiums. Lawrence chuckled. Well, think about it. Sometimes people need to hear how it's done the right way. Maybe, but I'd let the system speak for itself. I stood and grabbed my coat, heading for the door. You heading out? Lawrence asked. Yeah, I said, pausing at the threshold. Thought I'd catch the sunset. Because that was the thing about sunsets. They reminded you there was always a new day coming, always something better on the horizon if you were willing to build it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, built on doing good work while others scramble in the mess they made. Ever been underestimated until the results spoke for you? Let me know your story in the comments, and if this resonated, subscribe for more. Your next chapter might just start here.